Chip Zdarsky's years-long run on the main Batman title is wrapped up. Zdarsky's Failsafe saga tackles Bruce Wayne's paranoia and worst impulses, his backup personality Zurawie taking over Gotham with an unstoppable robot body. It's a story that spans decades, multiverses, and weaves into famous Batman stories like Year One and The Killing Joke to make an epic tale that changes our perceptions of Bruce Wayne and Batman. A paradigm shift that will radically alter the trajectory of Batman stories for years to come. Or at least, that seems to be what Zdarsky wanted the story to be. The problem is, it's overcomplicated, long-winded, contradicts itself, and many of its twists and turns range from painfully anticlimactic to bafflingly dumb. It's a run that started off decently strong, but, like Batman himself, doubles and triples down on its worst aspects to make what I genuinely believe to be the worst written Batman run in ages. So we're going to go through Batman issues 125 to 148 and point out why Zdarsky's Batman is an utter failure. Zdarsky's run opens with the Failsafe arc, where it turns out Batman built an Amazo Bat-Terminator bot that activates to kill Batman if he breaks his solemn no-killing rule. So the Penguin uses a special drug that perfectly simulates death to frame Batman. As news of Penguin's death circulates, Failsafe activates, defeating the League, taking over Gotham, and hunting Batman across the globe. In order to combat Failsafe and his robot army, Batman pulls out Zurawie. This is Batman's backup personality created by Grant Morrison, a primal version of Batman that activates when Bruce's psyche is shut down. He's Batman without Bruce Wayne, more savage and wild. Now, it's weird that Bruce would do this, because this isn't what Zur was created for. Zur is not some high-risk, high-reward power-up like Superman's solar flare or Guts' berserker armor. And in the end, Batman decides Zur is actually too extreme and isolationist to be useful in a global scenario like this. It's explained Bruce used Zur to create Failsafe and gave Alfred the code to disable Failsafe if Bruce was ever framed, and then wiped his own memory. But Alfred is dead, meaning there is no Failsafe to the Failsafe. To end Failsafe's hunt, it must believe Batman has died, the threat of a killer Batman neutralized. And so, after an admittedly cool sequence where Batman survives a fall to Earth from the moon, Batman lets Failsafe kill him. But of course, Batman never dies. Failsafe's gun actually sent Batman to an alternate Earth, making the robot believe he was dead. All of this is revealed in back-end stories in the next arc, and we'll touch more on it then. There's been a long-established fear in the character of Bruce Wayne, that if he starts killing his enemies for the sake of Gotham's protection, he may never stop. A snowball effect. It's a pretty famous speech in Under the Red Hood.
But if I do that, if I allow myself to go down into that place, I'll never come back.
This becomes the central idea floating through Zdarsky's Batman. What happens when Batman's paranoia and worst tendencies harm him and his loved ones? What happens when Batman kills? And unfortunately, this is where the problems start. A rotted foundation from the beginning. Reading Failsafe in hindsight, with the whole storyline finished, this arc is actually a microcosm of the entire storyline, down to the plot points and its flaws. But first, let's cover the next story arc, since the two together tell a complete story. The next arc is the Batman of Gotham, where Bruce Wayne struggles to survive on the aforementioned alternate universe, one without a Batman. Seemingly in his place is Darwin Halliday, CEO of Halliday Industry, who rules this alternate Gotham as Red Mask, with an army of Batman's rogues gallery. One of Halliday's pharmaceutical experiments went wrong, and he gained a glimpse of his prime universe self, the Joker. Since then, he became obsessed with regaining that connection, breaking his mind and releasing his potential as a supervillain. Halliday achieves this goal with a multiverse gas, one that connects his mind to the Joker during his Killing Joke backstory when Joker is pulling himself out of the riverside. Halliday does this repeatedly, and we find out this actually creates Jokers throughout the entire multiverse, driving them insane. It's implied this is Zdarsky writing an explanation for Jeff Johns' 3 Joker plotline that never really went anywhere. In their battle, Batman and Red Mask are flung through different universes. These include the universes of Batman 89, Batman Beyond, The Dark Knight, etc., etc., until arriving at the very end of the universe, where Red Mask is defeated and Tim Drake arrives to bring Bruce home. Okay, so you might be wondering how that last part happened. Zdarsky's Batman run includes short stories at the back end of the comic that feed into the main narrative. This one follows Tim Drake deducing that Batman was sent to another dimension by Failsafe's gun, which was actually made by Toyman, who faked his own death to send him and other people to a universe where he is in charge. With the help of Mr. Terrific, they construct a device that can hone in on Bruce's location and return him home. However, it's shown that just as there are multiverse Batmen, there are multiverse Zur-Ars. So the point made here is that Red Mask's arrogance creates the Joker, just as Bruce's arrogance and paranoia of youth created Zur, and thus created Failsafe, making Zur basically Batman's Joker. There's another Tale-End comic describing Zur as just pure aggression and violence that may have its uses, but is ultimately not fitted to solving the massively complex problems of a city like Gotham. Everyone is a victim, and everyone deserves to be saved. You stop when the threat of death sends them scurrying. Killing is a solution that doesn't stay true to Bruce or Batman. So let's point out the issues. The first point is that a story about Batman facing the consequences of his paranoia and arrogance has been done before. Tower of Babel is a famous Justice League of America story, where Batman infamously creates failsafe boxes to neutralize each member of the League, which gets stolen by Ra's al Ghul and used against them, nearly killing them all. The story ends with the League voting on whether they should remove Batman or not, and in the end, Batman chooses to remove himself. What makes this story work is two things. Developing failsafes against the League is not unreasonable within the canon. Hypnosis, possession, clones, etc. There are reasons to suspect at some point a hero's abilities could be manipulated for evil. It's plainly stated in the story that Batman hid this from his team, and that this is the major problem. If Batman had been upfront with saying, hey, in case any of us are compromised, I have a solution ready, I doubt many of his colleagues would have had such a serious problem. The point of Tower of Babel is not that Batman is unhinged or dangerous, but that his compulsion for secrecy, paranoia, and self-isolation leads him to make decisions detrimental to himself and his loved ones, and that if he chooses to operate that way, he should not be part of a team. Zdarsky literally rewrites this story so that Bruce never actually learned anything, and used Zur to create Failsafe. Throughout this run, Zdarsky keeps rewriting established stories. The Killing Joke, Tower of Babel, Batman R.I.P., and pretty much every universe's Batman. And as we go forward, he'll continue to inject his own lore into famous stories in a way that really just feels like a desperate attempt to brute force his Batman run into established canon. Zdarsky is not the first writer to do this, but I think here it comes off as the most egregious. And if it all ended here, that would be fine. A refutation of Zur-Nar, a lesson on arrogance, a fun multiversal adventure, and the establishment of multiversal Zurs. But the next arc throws all that away. In Gotham War, Zur takes over Bruce's mind and body, believing Bruce too soft on crime, and he enacts his plan by just fighting crime more aggressively. Like seriously, he's not killing people or anything. He's just far more active. At this time, Selina Kyle has taken Penguin's place as mob boss of the underworld, and is kinda rehabilitating her thieves, or at least keeping them on a tight leash so they don't do worse crimes. But of course, Zur goes after Selina and the thieves because they are criminals. Batman hunts criminals. Throughout all this, the Bat family is like, he's going too far. He's out of control. For what? Beating up criminals? That's what he does. You work with him. You know this. With every thief he stops, he's driving them back into their old ways. He's driving them to be henchmen, to violence, so he's responsible for that violence. You are all vigilantes. What are you waffling about? You're Jason Todd. How are you, of all people, saying this? Now, we can have a conversation about the civil rights of criminals, the failure of the justice system, the prison industrial complex, and all of that interconnected stuff. But that's not this story. This story is not about any of that. It doesn't make sense why they would suddenly be so against this to the point they have to physically subdue Bruce. It feels incredibly forced. After a scuffle, Zur kidnaps and basically lobotomizes Jason with a fear toxin that will suppress his adrenaline. This is to control Jason because he used to kill people. Now, this is despite it being made clear in the comic Zur approves of killing, but also, make note, Zur is not killing people now. And also, Zur created Failsafe to stop Batman if he killed. What does Zur actually believe? Bruce fights against the entire Bat family and eventually leaves them to continue his psychotic crime-busting ventures alone. It paints the picture that Bruce never had control in the first place and has always been a dangerous lunatic with a psychic parasite randomly taking over his mind and body. There's also a side plot about Vandal Savage taking over the Gotham underworld and becoming police commissioner, and frankly, it goes nowhere and adds nothing to the central plot. We're gonna pass over it. The next part of our story is Mind Bomb. Batman hunts down the Joker, but Joker uses a psychic phrase to disable Bruce Wayne and allow Zur to fully take control. So, I guess in the last arc, Zur was not fully controlling Bruce, he was just influencing him, and now he's fully in control. Seems like a very odd distinction to make. More than that, the Zurs of each multiverse Bruce passed through are now inside his head, somehow, and he has to fist fight them while Zur fights Joker. And then Zur moves his consciousness into the Failsafe robot, somehow, which apparently was Zur's plan from the beginning. He also created the programming gap that allowed Failsafe to be reprogrammed to send Batman to another universe so that Bruce could be sent through the multiple universes so his mind could collect the other Zurs. And now, all the Zurs are together in the Failsafe robot. And then we get what's basically a recreation of the same events of the first arc. Failsafe chases Batman around, goes through a snow-covered environment, and this isn't the first time this has happened in the arc, so I don't know how much of this is Zdarsky doing this intentionally, or if he just kind of likes certain set pieces. So at the end of the battle, Bruce is knocked out and locked up in a cell with the Joker. Joker knows about Zur, and Bruce wants to know how he knows about his mentors and his past. We need to take a detour into the other Zdarsky Batman series, Batman the Knight, a retelling of Bruce's journey to become Batman, weaving in characters like Zatanna, Hugo Strange, and a plethora of mentors. One such is Daniel Capshaw. Capshaw will be important to the main storyline. It's basically a year -1 for Batman and isn't essential for following the Failsafe story, but does lay a groundwork for the history Zdarsky is, once again, rewriting. We move into Joker Year 1, which sets up a canon backstory for the Joker. These events coincide with the Batman Year 1 storyline. Joker seeks out the person he believes sold him out while he was Red Hood, leading him to his current state. Turns out the Red Hood gang, along with the Black Masks and the Grey Ghosts, all have ties in Gotham's police force. This leads Joker to meet with Bruce's former mentor, Daniel Capshaw, who wants to turn Joker's madness into an enhanced version of Batman. This means unlocking Joker's own version of Zur. While all this is happening, we get a parallel storyline of a future apocalyptic Gotham that has been plagued by a Joker zombie virus. So this is notoriously where DC was accused of using AI-generated art, and from the investigations and summations of several artists, these accusations seem credible. Now, this video isn't about the ethics of AI art, so I won't dwell on it too much, but companies are trying to normalize AI to replace the work of actual artists. Artists who need time and money to accomplish their work. AI does not necessarily create art. It takes samples from existing art, meaning art that people have already produced, and creates simulacrums, summations of them. This practice is destroying an entire job field to save the company a few pennies while producing art that is almost literally soulless and filled with mistakes and imperfections if you know where to look for them. Now, narratively, this future arc doesn't seem to have any link to the main plot at all, but thematically it could represent Bruce's worst impulses taking over his city and loved ones in the form of a Joker virus. That's just my interpretation, at least. So it turns out anyone can have a Zur-En-Arrh if trained properly, complete with their own name. And we find out that the Joker is a type of Zur-En-Arrh, which is a really weird sentence to say.
Well, Gandalf is a type of Gollum.
You guys are lying now. Gollum is not even a... Gollum is a singular entity.
Gandalf is a type of Gollum. This is the stupidest sentence I've ever heard.
Joker is so adept at this, he can cycle between multiple Zurs, which seems to be Zdarsky yet again explaining the three Jokers. Now this doesn't make any fucking sense, because Morrison established that the name Zur-En-Arrh comes from a corruption of Zorro in Arkham, Bruce mishearing some of his father's words when he was a kid. Now you could reason out an explanation that fits in Zur's name coming from Bruce's memory and Daniel's backup personality having a similar naming scheme, and maybe Bruce named his own personality based on Daniel's name, but it also made him think of his father. But Zdarsky doesn't really go into it. I would say that this is just a minor issue, but the problem is these kinds of minor issues are everywhere throughout this run, and they become so numerous that they just cannot be ignored. Now, I don't need everything blatantly laid out for me, but I shouldn't have to justify the writer's own story for them. The consistent problem with Zdarsky's story is that it not only feels like he's retconning other stories to make it fit his narrative, but each issue feels like it retcons the last, which what I think are meant to be twists and turns in a larger mystery that builds up over time. But these answers don't really change that much about what happens. Like, oh, Zur-En-Arrh was actually a naming convention by Capshaw. Okay, who cares? Joker was actually driven insane by Red Mask. Joker's insanity isn't just his insanity, but also a Zur-En-Arrh. But, like, that doesn't really change anything now, does it? It doesn't really change the big picture. There's a lot of elements of this that you can cut out, make the narrative a lot simpler to understand, and you would still have the same story. So they don't feel like twists. They feel like Zdarsky writing himself into and out of corners, and consequently making an overcomplicated story that is just kind of a pain in the ass to read. We move into the Dark Prisons arc, where Zur uses the powerful Failsafe body to become a one-man army against crime. He sends out a public warning to all criminals, sends out an army of other Failsafe bots and villains such as Punchline, and then locking away his captives in Blackgate, which Zur has taken over. Zur reaches out to the other members of the Bat Fam, apologizing to them and telling them he's the real Bruce Wayne who died and moved his consciousness into the Failsafe body. He wants to make up, he wants to work with them. However, the only one who takes him up on this offer is Damian, still clinging to the affections of his father. Scott Snyder's Death of the Family is rewritten to have Joker finding the Failsafe robot. In a flashback, Capshaw bet the Joker that activating Failsafe would drive Zur to the surface and allow that personality to take control. In fact, it seems every escalation the Joker has ever done has been to break out Zur. This includes killing Jason Todd, the events of Snyder's Batman run, and Joker working with the Black Glove, taking on the persona of the Clown at Midnight. Now, this is all despite Zur seemingly already having control of Batman, and also Capshaw knowing the psychic phrase to bring out Zur. Joker manipulates Penguin into faking his own death. This activates Failsafe, which leads to Zur coming to the surface, which leads to Zur putting himself into the Failsafe body, which fulfills Capshaw's dream of creating the perfect Batman. Capshaw allies himself with Zur and becomes the Warden of Blackgate. And throughout all this, heroes like Superman are concerned for Bruce. They keep wondering, what if he goes too far? What if? What if? Batman already created a Terminator robot that violated his right of innocence until proven guilty, that was willing and capable of taking down the entire Justice League and more, takes over Gotham, turns it into a police state, and this happens twice in the same storyline. Bro went too far like 20 issues ago. How are we even still having this conversation? And so, the Bat family reunite and lead a final assault on Zur. Zur punches Jason Todd so hard he dies. Now this activates the Failsafe protocol in the Failsafe body that couldn't actually be fully erased, which Bruce knew because he had reclaimed memories of Zur that had been left behind, but Zur didn't remember them now because he erased his mind before. So somehow Zur, the Batman that decided that it was going to kill and brutalize criminals, and then doesn't kill and brutalize criminals, accidentally kills Jason Todd, and didn't realize that this would activate the protocol of the body that he put himself into, which then attacked itself because Batman is now in the Failsafe body and destroys him and deactivates all of the robots. And this is despite, in the beginning of the arc, Penguin already exploiting the fake your own death exploit, so Zur should know that this is a weakness. And so the trick is reversed on Zur, all the robots are deactivated, the Bat family reunite, and everyone lives happily ever after. I think Zdarsky really thought he was cooking here, making this almost poetic defeat where the villain is hoisted by his own petards. But really, think about that entire sequence of events, and the fact that Zur is supposed to be arrogance, or paranoia, or raw aggression, or something like that. No, that's not like a reversal of fortune. That's not clever writing. That's idiotic. That's buffoonery. It's an oopsie-daisy. It's basically Zur getting duck seasoned to death.
Rabbit season! Rabbit season! Duck season! Fire!
Zur is supposed to be another version of Bruce Wayne. If Bruce Wayne had made a mistake like this, or Batman had made a mistake like this, would you find that satisfying? The critique in the beginning of the story no longer works because what we're critiquing is not what Zdarsky set up to say Zur was. So the current form of Zur Failsafe isn't anything. It's like a completely detached concept. Any meaning or underlying theme is practically non-existent, self-destroying. More than just having an incredibly unsatisfying defeat of the big bad, the ending just seems pathetically flat. After all the danger Batman's actions put his family, other superheroes, and the entirety of Gotham City through, it's all just forgiven in the end? Water under the bridge, the Bat fam is reunited and happy? Now, I get it. They're company characters, it's superheroes, they're cyclical, we need to get back to a certain status quo to keep things going. But this is insane. After reading this entire storyline, I fully believe the only reasonable action after all this would be for the superheroes to never allow Bruce Wayne to operate as Batman again. How many times have we been here where Batman has either directly or indirectly been a threat to himself, his friends, and the whole world? And again, I have to go back to Tower of Babel because Zdarsky himself is pulling from the Tower of Babel. At the end of Tower of Babel, there are consequences, there are ramifications. There's something to chew on, something to change for things going forward. Now, could a future writer build off this and change things in a way? Yes, of course, but that's not how Zdarsky ends things. Zdarsky ends things on a happy ending. Combine all that, the overcomplicated multiversal origin of the Joker that nobody asked for, the repeated rewriting of about 1,000 different Batman stories. Frankly, this entire run needs to be chucked into limbo and forgotten. Writing this script, I kept struggling with organizing the events that happened, because to explain them fully, I have to go through things that happened in the past that are revealed in later issues, that explain and recontextualize things that happened in sometimes decades-old canon. I felt like I was a rubber ball chaotically bouncing throughout the timeline, trying to figure out where one story ended and one story began, and what the actual details of what happened were. All of these back and forths, multi-layered plans, side stories, high concepts don't feel like valuable reveals or twists. It feels like a story that keeps rewriting itself to justify its insane plot, creating these big, epic, super cool moments that the writer actually has to come up with complete nonsense to write themselves out of. It doesn't feel like brilliant enemies deducing each other's plans and coming up with counterplans. It feels like...
If you're talking about the code adjustments you made after I reprogrammed your brain with my nanobots.
I'm immune to your nanobots.
You're immune to the ones you designed, not mine.
I programmed you to build nanobots that were ineffective on me.
A belief that needed to be placed in your head by my nanobots.
You believe that because I programmed you to.
That's what I'm saying to you, though. You believe what I programmed you to believe.
Yes, because I programmed you to believe that.
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 In the end, instead of becoming this incredibly large magnum opus, you get a bloated story that just reeks of desperation to make the biggest, most awesome Batman story ever told. Zdarsky isn't the only one who has this problem. It seems almost every Batman writer since Grant Morrison has tried to one-up him and recreate his history-spanning, character-defining epic. And most of the time they fall pretty flat. And the biggest shame of it all is that there's another Batman run that conceptually does all the things Zdarsky's Batman was trying to do. And it ran alongside it. Ram V's Detective Comics succeeds at almost everything that Zdarsky's Batman fails at. A timeline-spanning, interconnected story, re-establishing elements of the past, tackling a flaw Bruce must overcome, a diverse cast of characters, pulling out Grant Morrison Batman concepts and expanding on them, and even Batman dealing with a sort of psychic parasite in his head that he must overcome to become a stronger Batman. It's been a really great run. It's not quite wrapped up yet, but if you haven't read it, I would recommend catching up. It's very good. Maybe I'll make a video on the full run later, but let's wrap up this video. I don't like having to call a run trash. Writing is hard. It takes a lot of work. And I can't imagine the kind of pressure that someone was in to write a monthly Batman comic, especially with DC editorial down your throat. But Zdarsky doubles and triples down to create this overwritten, bloated mess of a story where so much happens and so little of it means anything. It's a total conceptual overload. Zdarsky's Batman should not be a superhero. He's unhinged, out of control, making traps and killer robots that will take over cities to reach their goals. I don't know how or why the wider Batman family would forgive Bruce after this, or why his deranged actions as Batman should be tolerated by the wider superhero community. Zdarsky has ended his run in a state where you almost have no choice but to reject everything that he has written in order to carry on with the status quo. Ironically, he's written a story as self-destructive as Zur was when he put himself into the Failsafe body. I can only hope that eventually this entire run will be retconned and forgotten by all but the most obsessive comics YouTube weirdos. Hello and thank you for watching. If you didn't know, I'm an independent comic creator, and I'll be selling my comics at the Garden State Comics Fest this Saturday and Sunday. If you're a Jersey resident, come on down and see me, pick up a copy of my 1920s supernatural noir, Br'er Rabbit in the Jazzy. Like this video, subscribe, and check out my other stuff. Until next time, keep on reading.